What if I told you that behind the screaming guitars and thunderous drums, some of heavy metal's biggest icons were hiding something darker, an attitude that made them just as infamous offstage as they were on it? These weren't just rebellious rockers breaking the rules, they were egos out of control, feuds that tore bands apart, and behavior so outrageous it turned fans and fellow musicians against them. Here are 20 of the worst jerks in heavy metal history. 20. Roger Waters. While often linked more to progressive rock, Roger Waters deserves a spot here for his infamous arrogance and controlling behavior. Bandmates described him as impossible to work with, dominating creative decisions and dismissing others' contributions. His ego grew so massive that even in live performances, he insisted on calling all the shots. Fans adored Pink Floyd's music, but behind the scenes, Waters left a trail of bitterness, fractured friendships, and a reputation as one of rock's most unbearable personalities. Even decades later, his ongoing feuds and outspoken arrogance keep his name tied not just to brilliance, but also to being one of the biggest jerks in the history of heavy music. 19. Tom Araya. As the frontman of Slayer, Tom Araya is respected for his intense performances, but his reputation for arrogance has rubbed many the wrong way. In interviews, he's been dismissive, cold, and sometimes outright insulting toward other musicians and even fans. While his talent is unquestionable, his attitude has often overshadowed the respect people might otherwise have for him. His habit of speaking down to others has cemented him as more than just a tough metal personality. He's seen as unnecessarily condescending. Slayer's aggressive music made him a legend, but Araya's difficult persona offstage has led many to rank him among the worst jerks in the world of heavy metal. 18. Paul Stanley. Kiss co-founder Paul Stanley has long been accused of having one of the biggest egos in the industry. His tendency to belittle other bands, dismiss critics, and present himself as superior has earned him plenty of enemies. Fans may love his stage charisma, but behind the scenes, he's known for sharp arrogance and a patronizing tone in interviews. Instead of showing humility for Kiss's success, Stanley often flaunts it in ways that alienate peers. Combined with years of clashing with bandmates, his name continues to surface whenever discussions turn to rock and metal's most unbearable personalities. For many, Paul Stanley isn't just a star, he's a classic example of a heavy metal jerk. 17. Chris Barnes. Chris Barnes, the original vocalist of Cannibal Corpse and later frontman of 6 Feet Under, is infamous for his bad attitude toward fans, critics, and even fellow musicians. Instead of showing gratitude for the fanbase that built his career, Barnes has often lashed out with insults and dismissive remarks. His public feuds with newer death metal singers made him look bitter and insecure rather than respected. Many fans accuse him of acting entitled, despite his later music being widely criticized for a lack of quality. What cements his reputation is not just arrogance, but hostility, making him a name that consistently comes up when people talk about the worst jerks in heavy metal history. 16. Fred Durst. As the face of Limp Bizkit, Fred Durst became the poster child for nu metal arrogance. His reputation for being smug, egotistical, and constantly stirring drama has haunted him for decades. On stage and off, Durst thrived on creating chaos, often getting into feuds with fans, journalists, and other musicians. While his band enjoyed mainstream success, his abrasive personality made him one of the most disliked figures in heavy music. Instead of being remembered as a frontman who brought energy, he's remembered for starting fights, acting self-absorbed, and showing little respect for anyone around him. Fred Durst's antics perfectly capture why he's seen as one of heavy metal's most notorious jerks. 15. Scott Weiland. Scott Weiland of Stone Temple Pilots and Velvet Revolver was undeniably talented, but his career was plagued by ego clashes, destructive behavior, and constant turmoil with his bandmates. His struggles with substance abuse often fueled erratic actions that alienated not only fans, but also the people closest to him. Weiland's tendency to show up late, miss commitments, and disrespect fellow musicians made working with him nearly impossible. Many who collaborated with him described the experience as chaotic and frustrating, despite his brilliance on stage. Instead of building bridges, he burned them, leaving behind a reputation for arrogance and instability that keeps his name tied to heavy metal's most unbearable personalities. 14. Corey Taylor. Corey Taylor of Slipknot and Stone Sour has built his career not just on powerful music, but also on his loud mouth. While admired by fans, Taylor is notorious for constantly trash-talking other bands, mocking younger artists, and fueling drama with blunt, often unnecessary remarks. His tendency to insert himself into public disputes has left him branded as one of the most outspoken jerks in heavy metal. Instead of letting his music speak, Taylor seems to thrive on controversy, which overshadows his genuine talent. His sharp tongue, arrogance, and habit of belittling others put him high on the list of personalities that many in the heavy music scene love to hate. 13. David Lee Roth. David Lee Roth, the flamboyant frontman of Van Halen, is remembered for his charisma, but also for an ego that constantly clashed with those around him. His larger-than-life personality often tipped into arrogance, creating endless conflicts with his bandmates. Roth's need to be the center of attention made it nearly impossible to keep the band stable, leading to one of the most famous splits in rock history. Behind the flashy stage persona was someone who dismissed others' contributions and treated himself as the sole star. While fans loved his energy, those who worked with him often describe him as difficult, self-centered, and impossible to manage, securing his place among heavy metal's most notorious jerks. 12. Kerry King. As Slayer's guitarist, Kerry King built a reputation not just for crushing riffs, but also for being outspoken in ways that rubbed people the wrong way. He often trashed other bands publicly, mocking their styles and dismissing their relevance. Instead of being professional, King seemed to thrive on stirring rivalries, earning him a reputation for arrogance. His bluntness, while admired by some, has also alienated many within the metal scene. Fans may celebrate his contributions to thrash, but his attitude toward peers has often overshadowed his skill. Kerry King's habit of tearing others down rather than lifting them cements his place as one of the most abrasive personalities in heavy metal history. 11. Glenn Danzig. Glenn Danzig carved out a cult following with the Misfits, Samhain, and his solo work, but his reputation for arrogance and hostility is legendary. Stories of him picking fights, acting superior to fans, and lashing out at critics have followed him for decades. The infamous video of him being knocked out backstage after starting a confrontation only fueled the perception that his tough guy attitude often crossed into jerk territory. While his dark aesthetic and powerful voice made him iconic, his offstage behavior told a different story. For many, Danzig's ego and constant aggression define him more than his music, earning him a secure spot on any list of heavy metal's biggest jerks. 10. Ted Nugent. Ted Nugent's guitar skills and stage presence are undeniable, but his reputation as one of the most disliked personalities in heavy music overshadows his talent. Loud, brash, and unfiltered, Nugent has spent decades alienating fans with his over-the-top arrogance and controversial statements. While some admire his bluntness, many see him as someone who thrives on being offensive and dismissive. Instead of focusing on his craft, Nugent often uses interviews to belittle others, stir outrage, and flaunt his ego. His confrontational style and lack of humility have made him one of the most polarizing figures in the industry. Nugent isn't just a rocker with an opinion, he's one of heavy metal's most notorious jerks. 9. Sebastian Bach. Sebastian Bach, former frontman of Skid Row, built his career on raw energy and charisma, but his temper and arrogance made him one of the most notorious jerks in heavy metal. He was infamous for lashing out at fans, throwing objects during shows, and clashing violently with other musicians. His offstage behavior often overshadowed his vocal talent, leaving bandmates frustrated and burned out by his unpredictable nature. Bach's habit of fueling feuds rather than resolving them made him difficult to work with, and his reputation as a hot-headed diva never left him. While his voice earned him respect, his reckless behavior and oversized ego placed him firmly among heavy metal's worst personalities. 8. Tommy Lee. As the drummer of Motley Crue, Tommy Lee embraced the wild rock and roll lifestyle to the fullest, but that lifestyle also fueled his reputation as a jerk. Known for reckless behavior, fights, and constant drama, Lee became infamous for his inability to separate his personal chaos from his music career. Whether it was brawls with paparazzi, clashes with bandmates, or public scandals, Lee thrived on controversy. Instead of focusing solely on his drumming, he seemed addicted to trouble, often dragging his band's name through the mud. His arrogance and disregard for consequences made him one of the most disliked figures in metal, proving that talent doesn't erase a reputation for being difficult. 7. Gene Simmons. Gene Simmons of Kiss is perhaps the most notorious example of ego in the music industry. His obsession with money, power, and branding made him a business mogul, but it also earned him a reputation as one of the most arrogant personalities in heavy metal. Simmons is known for condescending interviews, belittling other artists, and openly flaunting his superiority. Fans and peers alike have called him greedy, self-absorbed, and impossible to deal with. While his contributions to Kiss cannot be denied, Simmons often comes across less as a musician and more as a businessman who puts profit above people. His relentless arrogance secures him a permanent place on the list of heavy metal's worst jerks. 6. Yngwie Malmsteen. Yngwie Malmsteen is a guitar virtuoso whose technical brilliance is undeniable, but his reputation for arrogance is legendary. Known for throwing tantrums, belittling bandmates, and treating collaborators poorly, Malmsteen's ego has often overshadowed his music. One infamous story involves him yelling at a flight attendant and demanding champagne mid-flight, cementing his image as a diva. While his talent places him among the best guitarists of his generation, his lack of humility and habit of insulting others left fans and peers shaking their heads. Instead of being remembered solely for his skill, Malmsteen is equally remembered for his attitude, making him one of heavy metal's most infamous jerks. 5. Phil Anselmo. Phil Anselmo, frontman of Pantera and later Down, has long carried the reputation of being one of metal's most volatile figures. His explosive temper, drunken outbursts, and offensive remarks have followed him throughout his career. Most infamously, he's been accused of making racist comments on stage, sparking outrage from fans and peers alike. While his voice helped shape Pantera's aggressive sound, his behavior off-stage left a stain on his legacy. Many saw him as arrogant, unstable, and dismissive of criticism. Instead of controlling his actions, Anselmo often seemed to thrive on chaos, turning his reputation from legendary frontman to one of heavy metal's most infamous jerks. 4. Axl Rose. Axl Rose of Guns N' Roses is legendary for his voice and stage presence, but his reputation as one of rock's biggest egos is just as famous. He became notorious for showing up hours late to concerts, feuding with bandmates, and storming off stage when things didn't go his way. Fans often paid the price for his diva behavior, with shows canceled or ruined by his temper. While his talent made him iconic, his arrogance and unpredictable attitude made him one of the most difficult personalities in music. To many, Axl Rose represents the ultimate rock star stereotype: brilliant on stage, unbearable off it, and permanently ranked among heavy metal's worst jerks. 3. Vince Neil. Vince Neil, lead singer of Mötley Crüe, has a long history of reckless and selfish behavior that cements his spot on this list. His numerous DUIs, public fights, and notorious involvement in a tragic car crash that killed Hanoi Rock's drummer Razzle made him one of the most disliked figures in metal. Instead of showing remorse, Neil often carried on with arrogance, angering both fans and critics. His on-stage performances in later years have also been criticized as careless, showing little respect for the audience. Between his personal scandals and public arrogance, Neil's reputation goes far beyond just being wild. He is seen as one of the biggest jerks in heavy metal. 2. Dave Mustaine. Dave Mustaine, founder of Megadeth and former Metallica guitarist, is a legend in thrash metal, but his ego and temper have defined his career as much as his music. Known for holding grudges, lashing out at critics, and constantly feuding with fellow musicians, Mustaine's arrogance made him one of the most polarizing figures in heavy metal. His endless rants and interviews often turned fans against him, and his inability to let go of the past kept rivalries alive for decades. While his guitar work and songwriting are iconic, his behavior has left a trail of resentment. Dave Mustaine is the perfect example of brilliance mixed with bitterness, earning him the label of one of metal's worst jerks. 1. Lars Ulrich. At the top of the list sits Metallica's drummer, Lars Ulrich, widely regarded as one of heavy metal's most unbearable personalities. His arrogance and controlling nature within the band have been documented for years, but it was the infamous Napster lawsuit that made him the ultimate villain in the eyes of fans. Seen as greedy and out of touch, Ulrich's actions painted him as someone more concerned with money than music. Beyond that, his dismissive attitude toward others in interviews and conflicts with bandmates only added to the resentment. While Metallica remains one of the biggest metal bands of all time, Lars Ulrich stands out as heavy metal's #1 jerk. Heavy metal has always thrived on chaos, but as you've seen, not all of it came from the music. Some of these stars carved their names in history with riffs and vocals, while their behavior left scars that fans and bandmates will never forget. But here's the real question: do these wild antics add to the myth of heavy metal, or do they tarnish the music forever? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you never miss the untold stories behind rock's loudest legends.